My grandmother swore by this story until her dying day. It was during the war in London, and my dad was a baby. She was bombed out of her house and was staying with a friend. The friend had set her up in a room on the top floor. She was taking my dad upstairs to bed when a figure materialized on the stair telling her not to sleep in that room tonight. She noped back downstairs and told her friend that she and my dad were sleeping in the sitting room that night. Her friend was annoyed, but agreed. That night, a bomb exploded near the house and the roof caved in, right on top of my dad's cot. He would have been killed. Back in 2004, I was a young, dumb 17-year-old country girl in the city for the first time for college. One night, I decided I could totally safely walk back to my dorm at around 1:30 in the morning, despite not really knowing where I was. Of course, I instantly ended up wandering around a terrible part of the city. Most of the streetlights were busted out, trash everywhere, loud arguments from inside the dilapidated as fuck row houses. In short, I wouldn't even want to be here in the middle of the day. A car drives up behind me and slows down so they're keeping pace with me for nearly an entire block. I look over, and there are 5 unsavory-looking men inside. By this point, I was approaching an intersection, and they pull up, make a left, and stop in the street directly in my path. Motherfucker. I completely panic at this point and just stand there, right in front of them. My mind went completely blank. I've never been that scared in my life. It didn't even make sense to try to run because they would have caught me without question. I'm not really sure how long I stood there, but suddenly, the porch light in the house just past the car came on. Dude casually strolls outside carrying a bag of trash, and the car peels away. I completely break down crying and shaking. Dude spots me and listens to my probably incoherent story, takes me inside, and gives me a soda. Then he and his roommate walk me back to my dorm. They are both lovely and invited me to check out their stand-up sometime, but unfortunately, I was too young to get into a bar. I never saw them again, and don't even remember their names, but feel pretty confident that if that guy hadn't decided to take his trash out at 1 a.m. on a Saturday, my life would have taken a really shitty turn that night. My mother told me this not too long ago, but it happened about 10 years ago now. When my cousin was 17 or 18 years old, she was in a car crash and had died a couple of weeks later in hospital. She was really close to my dad's sister, our aunt, and used to babysit her kids, who were no more older than 4 years old, all the time. Our aunt's house was under construction just before she passed away, and it continued on after she passed away. One day, my aunt got a phone call while she was at work from one of the construction workers complaining about a teenage girl who keeps showing up at the house and walking around, and that she shows up a number of times during the weeks, and it has been happening for a couple of weeks. My aunt asks for a description of the girl to see if she knows her from around the neighborhood. And sure enough, the description perfectly matches my cousin who died a few weeks before. Long brown hair, red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket. When my aunt got home, she showed them a picture of my cousin, and they all agreed that it was the girl they had seen walking around the site. This story really freaked me out when I heard it, because our family was never one to believe in anything paranormal, or have anything of the paranormal sort to happen to us before. When I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night, we were really bored and he suggested we go explore the house next door, since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back, and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looks like it was built in maybe the 1950s, and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down, on the floor, across from this table, and are just hanging out talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden, my friend screams, and in an instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see. My body was engulfed in this sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming, and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back, and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the streetlight. It was December, and should have been much warmer inside the house. Finally, I look at my friend, and he looks scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked myself, and finally ask him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing, this figure, that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl, crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently, I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends, and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes, and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. When I was 13, my grandmother was dying of cancer, and my mother and I stayed at her house and took care of her during her last few weeks. One night, at 3 or so in the morning, my mother ran into my room and told me that my grandmother, who was by this time completely bedridden, entered my mother's room, woken her up, and then walked out of the room. There was no creepiness at the time, just a genuine concern for what my grandmother could possibly be doing up at 3 a.m. when she was literally days away from dying. We ran into her room, and sure enough, she had passed away. Obviously, given the shock of my grandmother dying, my mother and I didn't sit around chatting about how weird the whole experience was. But months or perhaps even years later, I asked her about that night, and she has no memory of telling me that my grandmother was up and walking around the house. She doesn't even remember what woke her up or why she woke me up. Gives me shivers just writing it.